I bought a fixer-upper from a shady investor, but ended up exposing his $10 million mortgage fraud scheme. For most Americans, buying a home is the ultimate symbol of stability. For me, it became a descent into a criminal underworld of forged deeds, fake notaries, and a Ponzi scheme built on drywall and lies. I fought a multi-millionaire real estate tycoon, not with a gun, but with the county recorder's office and the FBI's Economic Crimes Unit. And when the dust settled, I didn't just get my house, I watched his empire get auctioned off by the U.S. Marshals. It started 2 years ago. I was a 28-year-old general contractor. I had spent a decade fixing up other people's houses, saving every penny I earned. My dream was simple: buy a distressed property, a fixer-upper, renovate it myself with my own sweat equity, and turn it into my forever home without being chained to a massive mortgage for 30 years. I found the listing on a popular real estate investment forum. It wasn't on the MLS, multiple listing service. It was an off-market special. The house was a beautiful but dilapidated Victorian in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. The asking price was $250,000, cash only. The market value for a renovated home in that area was easily $600,000. It was the deal of a lifetime. The seller was a man named Rick. Rick was a local celebrity in the real estate world. He ran a company called Phoenix Flipping, hosted expensive seminars on how to get rich in real estate, and drove a matte black Lamborghini Urus. He projected the image of ultimate success. I met Rick at the property. He was charismatic, fast-talking, and wearing a watch that cost more than my truck. He told me he was unloading inventory to free up capital for a commercial development. He pressured me, saying he had 3 other cash offers on the table. "I like you, OP," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're a blue-collar guy like I used to be. I want to give you a leg up. If you can wire the $250,000 by Friday, the keys are yours." I was hooked. I emptied my savings, borrowed money from my parents, and liquidated my small retirement fund. I scraped together exactly $250,000. We didn't use a traditional closing attorney. Rick insisted on using his preferred title company to save on closing costs. He called it Liberty Title and Escrow. It sounded legitimate. I went to their office, a small suite in a generic office park, signed a mountain of paperwork, handed over my cashier's check, and received the warranty deed. I walked out of there feeling like a king. I owned a home, free and clear. No mortgage, no banks, just me and the American dream. I spent the next 6 months pouring my soul into that house. I gutted the kitchen, rewired the electrical, and replaced the roof. I spent another $50,000 on materials. I worked nights and weekends. My girlfriend and I moved in, sleeping on a mattress on the floor amidst the sawdust. But we were happy. The house was transforming. It was becoming worth nearly $600,000. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my dream died. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a county sheriff deputy standing on my newly refinished porch. He didn't smile. He handed me a thick envelope taped with red warnings. "What is this?" I asked. "Notice of foreclosure sale. The auction is scheduled for next month." I laughed. I literally laughed in his face. "There's must be a mistake, officer. I own this house outright. I paid cash. I have the deed right here." The deputy looked at me with a look of pity I will never forget. "Son, the bank says the mortgage hasn't been paid in 6 months. You might want to call a lawyer." I rushed inside and ripped open the envelope. The plaintiff listed wasn't me or Rick. It was Global Omnibank. The lawsuit claimed there was an outstanding first-position mortgage on the property for $450,000, and it was in default. My mind was spinning. How could there be a mortgage? I paid cash. Rick told me the title was clear. Liberty Title and Escrow had given me a title insurance policy guaranteeing it. I called Rick immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I drove to his office. It was locked. Lights off. Panic set in. I drove to Liberty Title and Escrow. The office suite was empty. The sign was gone. Through the window, I saw only bare carpet and a few phone jacks hanging from the wall. I realized with a sickening thud in my stomach that Liberty Title wasn't a real title company. It was a storefront Rick had set up to process his own scams. I raced to the county recorder's office, the government building where all property deeds and liens are publicly filed. I needed to see the chain of title. The clerk pulled up the records for my address. What she showed me made my knees buckle. According to the official government records, Rick had purchased the house 6 months before selling it to me. But he didn't pay cash. He took out a massive hard money loan of $450,000 from Global Omni Bank to buy it. When he sold the house to me for $250,000 cash, he was supposed to use my money to pay off his $450,000 loan, but he didn't. He simply pocketed my $250,000 and walked away. But it was worse. The warranty deed he gave me, the piece of paper that said I own the house, was never recorded. Rick, acting as the fake title company, had notarized it but never filed it with the county. Legally, I didn't own the house. Rick still owned it, and Rick owed the bank $450,000. And because he stopped paying the bank the moment he got my cash, the bank was now taking the house back. I was a squatter in a house that I'd paid $250,000 for and renovated with my own hands. I had lost my savings, I had lost my parents' money, and in 30 days, the sheriff was going to come back and throw my furniture onto the street. I sat on the steps of the recorder's office and cried. I felt stupid. I felt violated. I had been played by a master. But as I wiped my eyes, I looked closer at the stack of documents the clerk had printed out. I noticed something strange about the mortgage documents Rick had filed with the bank. The date on the loan application was after the date I had moved in. Rick had not only stolen my money, he had used the value of my renovations, the new roof, the new kitchen, to get a higher appraisal for his loan before he defaulted. He had used my sweat equity to steal even more money from the bank. I wasn't just a victim of theft. I was an unwitting accomplice in bank fraud. I stopped crying. I got angry. Rick thought I was just a blue-collar guy who would roll over and disappear. He thought I didn't understand how the system worked. He was right about one thing. I was blue-collar, which meant I knew how to demolish things, and I was about to take a sledgehammer to his entire life. I didn't go to a regular lawyer. I went to a real estate litigator who specialized in quiet title actions and fraud. I needed to stop that foreclosure auction, and I needed to hunt Rick down.
The first thing you learn when you enter high-stakes real estate litigation is that justice isn't free. It requires a retainer. I hired a lawyer named Vance. Vance wasn't the kind of lawyer who had billboards on the highway. He was the kind of lawyer banks hired when they wanted to crush someone. He cost $450 an hour, and he was worth every penny. I sat in Vance's conference room, surrounded by mahogany and the smell of old money. I laid out my pathetic stack of documents, the unrecorded warranty deed, the fake title insurance policy, and the foreclosure notice. Vance looked at them for less than a minute. "It's a classic double escrow fraud," he said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Rick bought the property with the bank's money, sold it to you for your cash, and kept both. He never intended to pay off the loan. He used your cash to float his lifestyle for a few months, and now he's moved on." "So, I lose the house?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Not necessarily," Vance said, "but we have to move fast. The foreclosure auction is in 28 days. If that gavel drops, the house is gone, and you are just an unsecured creditor chasing a ghost. We need to file a lis pendens immediately." A lis pendens is a Latin term meaning suit pending. It's a legal notice filed with the county that tells the world, and more importantly, any potential buyers at the auction, that the ownership of the property is in dispute. It effectively freezes the title. No one will buy a house with a lis pendens attached to it. It was our shield. Vance filed the lis pendens that afternoon. He also filed a lawsuit against Rick, Liberty Title, and Global Omnibank for fraud, quiet title, and negligence. But filing a lawsuit is one thing. Finding the defendant is another. Rick had vanished. His phone was disconnected. His sleek office was empty. The Phoenix flipping website was taken down. He was a ghost. Vance hired a private investigator, a former federal agent named Miller, to track Rick's assets. We needed to know if Rick was actually broke or just hiding the money. Miller's report came back 3 days later, and it was terrifying. Rick wasn't just a shady flipper. He was running a massive, sophisticated Ponzi scheme involving over 30 properties across 3 counties. Here is how the scheme worked. Rick would use straw buyers, people with good credit but no money, to take out massive loans to buy junk properties at inflated prices. He would then flip these properties to cash buyers like me, using his fake title company to steal the purchase money. He would use a portion of the new stolen money to make the monthly mortgage payments on the old loans, keeping the banks happy and the scheme floating. But like all Ponzi schemes, eventually he ran out of new victims. The cash flow stopped. The mortgage payments bounced. And now 30 houses, including mine, were collapsing into foreclosure all at once. The total value of the fraud was estimated at over $10 million. "We have a problem," Vance told me. "Rick is likely preparing to flee the country. He has liquidated his cars. He put his own house in his wife's name months ago, a fraudulent transfer we can attack later. But that takes time. Right now, our biggest enemy isn't Rick. It's the bank." Global Omnibank, the entity foreclosing on my home, wasn't sympathetic. To them, I wasn't a victim. I was an annoyance. I was a squatter occupying their collateral. We arranged a meeting with the bank's legal counsel. I thought if I showed them the proof of the fraud, the fake deed, the police report I had filed, they would pause the foreclosure. I was naive. The bank's lawyer was a cold woman in a gray suit. She didn't even look at my evidence. She said, "Mr. OP, Global Omnibank holds a valid, recorded, first position mortgage lien. Your deed was never recorded. Under the state's race notice statute, the first party to record their interest wins. We recorded, you didn't. Legally, you have no claim to the title. We are proceeding with the auction." It was the most infuriating moment of my life. The bank had lent money to a con artist without verifying his assets, and now they were punishing me for it. You lent him money on a house that was worth $200,000, and you appraised it at $450,000. Your appraiser was in on it. That's mortgage fraud. The lawyer stood up. "If you have evidence of internal collusion, file a subpoena. Until then, vacate the premises within 20 days, or we will send the sheriff to evict you." I walked out of that meeting shaking with rage. The system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed, to protect the banks. Vance put a hand on my shoulder. "Don't get angry, OP. Get leverage. The bank doesn't care about fraud unless it hurts them. We need to prove that their mortgage is invalid." "How?" I asked. "They recorded it." "We need to find the notary," Vance said. "Every real estate transaction requires a notary public to verify the identity of the signatures. The fake deed Rick gave me was notarized. The fraudulent mortgage Rick gave the bank was also notarized. If we could prove that the notary was part of the scam, that she faked the signatures or wasn't present when the documents were signed, then the documents themselves could be declared void ab initio, void from the beginning. If the bank's mortgage deed was void, they couldn't foreclose. Miller, the PI, went to work hunting down the notary. Her name on the stamp was Sarah Jenkins. She wasn't hard to find. She wasn't a ghost like Rick. She was a 24-year-old single mom working as a receptionist at a car dealership 2 towns over. Miller approached her in the parking lot after her shift. He didn't use intimidation. He used fear of the law. He showed her the lawsuit listing her as a co-defendant in a $10 million RICO case. "Sarah," Miller told her, "Rick is going to prison. The only question is whether you go with him. You notarized 30 fraudulent deeds. That's 30 counts of felony forgery. Unless you want to lose your kid and spend 10 years in federal prison, you need to talk to us." Sarah broke down immediately. She wasn't a mastermind. She was Rick's former assistant. Rick had paid her $500 extra per document to stamp papers without asking questions. She admitted that she never verified IDs. She admitted that sometimes Rick would bring her stacks of documents already signed by buyers and sellers who weren't even in the room, and she would stamp them. This was notary fraud. But then she dropped the bombshell, the detail that would turn the tide of the war. "It wasn't just me," Sarah sobbed. "Rick had a guy on the inside at the bank, at Global Omni. That's how we got the loans approved so fast. He called him the banker. I saw Rick give him envelopes of cash in the parking lot." My heart stopped. I was right. The bank wasn't just negligent, they were complicit. An insider at the bank was approving these bad loans in exchange for kickbacks. Vance smiled for the first time. "This changes everything," he said. "This isn't a foreclosure case anymore. This is a RICO case. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. We can sue the bank for triple damages." We had the leverage. Now we needed to set the trap. We needed Sarah to testify, but more importantly, we needed her to help us catch Rick. Sarah told us that Rick was still in town, hiding in a rented condo under a fake name, waiting for his offshore accounts to clear so he could fly to Belize. "He contacted me yesterday," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "He needs me to notarize one last document, a power of attorney so he can access a hidden safety deposit box." Vance looked at me. He said, "We're going to set up a sting. We're going to catch him signing a fraudulent document, and we're going to invite the FBI to the party." I looked at the house I had built with my own hands. The bank wanted to take it. Rick wanted to steal the value of it. But now, I had the one thing neither of them expected: a witness. I told Sarah to text Rick back. I said, "Tell him you'll meet him. Tell him to bring the cash."
The difference between a civil lawsuit and a federal criminal investigation often comes down to one thing: flight risk. When Miller, our private investigator, presented the evidence to his contacts at the FBI Economic Crimes Unit, the forged deeds, Sarah's confession, and the proof that Rick was liquidating assets to move to a non-extradition country, the feds didn't wait for a grand jury indictment. They obtained an emergency probable cause warrant. But they didn't want to just arrest Rick at his condo. They wanted him to incriminate himself. They wanted him to lead them to the money, and more importantly, to the insider at the bank. They agreed to let us proceed with the meeting involving Sarah, but under strict federal surveillance. The sting was set for 10 a.m. at a quiet coffee shop near the marina. It was a public place, easy to monitor. Sarah was terrified. She was wearing a hidden recording device provided by the Bureau. Her role was simple: get Rick to sign the fraudulent power of attorney document and, if possible, get him to mention the bank insider.
I sat in a van across the street with Miller and 2 FBI agents. We watched the feed from a camera hidden in a potted plant next to Sarah's table. My palms were sweating. This was the man who stole my life savings, the man who was about to make me homeless. Seeing him walk into the frame, looking tanned and relaxed in a linen suit, made my blood boil. Rick sat down. He didn't order coffee. He slid a document across the table to Sarah. "Just stamp it here and here," Rick said, his voice clear on the audio feed, "and date it for last week." I'm scared, Rick," Sarah stammered. She was playing her part perfectly, driven by the fear of prison. "The bank is foreclosing on all those houses. People are asking questions. That guy OP, he filed a lawsuit." Rick laughed. It was a dismissive, cruel sound. "Don't worry about him. He's a carpenter. He can't afford a real lawyer. By the time the bank kicks him out, we'll be drinking mojitos on a beach. The bank doesn't care about him. They just want the asset back. The banker has it handled." "But what if they investigate the loans?" Sarah pressed. "They won't," Rick said, lowering his voice. "I paid VP Harrison 50 grand cash last night to scrub the loan files. The appraisal reports are gone. There's no paper trail linking the loans to the kickbacks. Now stamp the damn paper so I can get to the safety deposit box." That was it. He named him. VP Harrison. Vice President Harrison, a high-ranking executive at Global Omni Bank. The confession was recorded in high definition. Sarah pulled out her notary stamp. Her hand was shaking. She stamped the document. Rick smiled, grabbed the paper, and stood up. "Good girl. I'll wire your cut when I land." He turned to leave. He took 3 steps toward the door before the coffee shop was swarmed. Federal agents. Drop the bag. The takedown was swift and undramatic. Rick didn't run. He just froze, his face turning a pale shade of gray. He looked at Sarah, then at the agents. The arrogance evaporated instantly. As they handcuffed him, I stepped out of the van. I wanted him to see me. Our eyes locked as they shoved him into the back of an SUV. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The look of absolute shock on his face was worth more than the $250,000 he stole from me. But the arrest of Rick was just the appetizer. The main course was the bank. Rick was taken to the Federal Detention Center. White-collar criminals are notoriously fragile. They're used to comfort, not concrete cells. The FBI agents, armed with the recording of him admitting to bribing a bank executive, offered him a choice. Go down for bank fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft, a combined sentence of 30 years minimum, or flip on the banker and get a reduced sentence. Rick flipped in less than an hour. He gave up everything. He detailed the entire scheme. VP Harrison wasn't just approving bad loans, he was the architect. Harrison would identify distressed properties on the bank's internal real estate-owned REO list, tip off Rick to buy them cheap, then approve massive renovation loans based on falsified appraisals that Harrison himself authorized. They were looting the bank from the inside out. Crucially, Rick revealed where the money was. It wasn't in Belize yet. It was in a series of shell company accounts at a small regional bank, and in a physical safety deposit box that contained gold bars and cash, the very box he was trying to access with the document Sarah notarized. The FBI executed a seizure warrant on the safety deposit box. They recovered $2 million in gold and cash. They also froze the shell accounts containing another $4 million. But for me, the money wasn't safe yet. The FBI seizure meant the government held the money, not me. My house was still in foreclosure. Global Omni Bank was still moving forward with the auction, claiming they were victims too. This is where my lawyer, Vance, played his masterstroke. He didn't wait for the criminal trial against Harrison. He filed an emergency motion in civil court for a preliminary injunction to stop the foreclosure sale of my home. We walked into civil court the next morning. The bank's lawyer was there, looking annoyed. "Your Honor, this is a delay tactic. The mortgage is in default." Vance stood up. He didn't argue about the default. He handed the judge a transcript of the FBI recording where Rick admitted to bribing a bank executive to approve the loans. Your Honor, Global Omni Bank is claiming they are a victim. In reality, their own vice president of lending conspired to create this fraudulent mortgage. Under the legal doctrine of vicarious liability, the bank is responsible for the criminal acts of its officers committed within the scope of their employment. This mortgage is not a valid debt. It is a crime scene. It is the fruit of a racketeering enterprise run from within the bank. The judge read the transcript. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked at the bank's lawyer. Counsel, are your client aware that their vice president has been named as a co-conspirator in a federal investigation? The bank's lawyer went white. She clearly didn't know. Harrison hadn't been arrested yet. The FBI was still building the case. We had blindsided them. I have no information on that, Your Honor. She stammered. Well, I suggest you get some, the judge said. I am issuing a temporary restraining order halting all foreclosure proceedings on this property and all 30 other properties associated with this defendant. And I'm putting Global Omni Bank on notice. If these allegations are true, your mortgage lien is worthless. The gavel banged. The auction was stopped. My house was safe, for now. But the war wasn't over. We had stopped the foreclosure, but we still had to get the title back, and we had to get Harrison. As we left the courthouse, Vance got a call from Miller. Turn on the news, Miller said. We watched on a phone in the hallway. The FBI had just raided the corporate headquarters of Global Omni Bank. Cameras captured agents carrying out boxes of files, and then the shot everyone was waiting for. VP Harrison, a man in a $5,000 suit being led out in handcuffs, shielding his face with a jacket. The news ticker at the bottom read, Bank executive arrested in $10 million mortgage fraud ring. I looked at Vance. So what happens now? Vance smiled a shark-like smile. Now? Now we sue the bank. Not just for the house, we sue them for negligence, for fraud, and for the emotional distress of trying to make you homeless. We don't just want the mortgage canceled, OP. We want them to pay you for the privilege of canceling it. Rick was in jail. Harrison was in jail. The fraud was exposed. But the civil battle for compensation, the RPM gold mine, was just beginning. The bank was backed into a corner, and, like any wounded animal, they were about to fight dirty.
There is a misconception that when a bank gets caught doing something illegal, they apologize. They don't. They calculate the cost of fighting versus the cost of settling. Global Omni Bank, facing a criminal scandal involving their vice president, didn't send me a fruit basket. They sent a team of litigators from a top-tier Wall Street firm. Their strategy was simple: the rogue agent defense. 2 weeks after the arrests, we sat down for a mandatory settlement conference. The bank's lead counsel, a man named Mr. Sterling, no relation to my previous lawyer, just another expensive suit, laid out their position. Gentlemen, Sterling said, smoothing his tie, Global Omni Bank is a victim here, just like OP. VP Harrison was acting outside the scope of his employment. He was a rogue agent breaking company policy. Therefore, the bank is not liable for his criminal conduct. The mortgage lien on OP's property remains valid. However, as a gesture of goodwill, we are willing to offer a modification. OP can assume the $450,000 mortgage at a reduced interest rate. I almost flipped the table. Assume the mortgage? I yelled. I paid cash. I don't owe you a dime. Your employees stole my money. Vance, my lawyer, placed a calming hand on my arm. He looked at Sterling and smiled that dangerous, shark-like smile again. Mr. Sterling, Vance said calmly, that is a lovely theory, but it fails on the doctrine of respondeat superior. The bank profited from Harrison's loans for years. You collected interest. You paid him bonuses based on loan volume. You created the incentive structure that encouraged fraud. And now, we're not just suing for quiet title. We are amending our complaint. Vance slid a thick document across the table. We are adding a claim for civil RICO violations. We are alleging that Global Omni Bank, through its lack of AML, anti-money laundering controls, and its negligent supervision, facilitated a criminal enterprise. Under RICO statutes, we are entitled to treble damages. That's triple the amount of loss, plus attorney's fees. Sterling's face didn't move, but his eyes tightened. Triple damages on a $10 million fraud ring was a $30 million liability, plus the PR nightmare. "We will see you in court," Sterling said, standing up. "Prepare for a long winter. Gentlemen, we will bury you in paper." And they tried. The next 3 months were a brutal war of attrition, known as the discovery phase. The bank buried us in motions. They filed a motion to dismiss, arguing I lacked standing because my name wasn't on the original loan. They filed a motion for summary judgment, claiming the title company, Rick, was the sole liable party. Vance fought every single one. I drained my legal defense fund. I took out a personal loan. I was working double shifts at construction sites just to pay Vance's retainer. But discovery cuts both ways. While they were trying to bankrupt me, Vance was demanding the bank's internal emails. We wanted to know how Harrison got away with it for so long. We subpoenaed the bank's internal audit reports and the emails between Harrison and his regional manager. The bank fought the subpoena, claiming attorney-client privilege and trade secrets. It took a court order from a federal judge to force them to hand over the server logs. When we finally got the documents, we found the smoking gun. It wasn't an email from Harrison. It was an email to Harrison from the regional manager, dated 6 months prior to the arrests. The email read, "Harrison, your loan volume is up 40% this quarter. Outstanding work. Corporate has flagged some documentation irregularities regarding the Phoenix flipping portfolio, specifically the lack of independent appraisals. I've overridden the compliance flag for now, but try to clean up the paperwork before the Q3 audit. We need these numbers to hold for the earnings call." There it was. I've overridden the compliance flag. The bank knew. They didn't know specifically about the bribes, perhaps, but they knew the loans were suspicious. They knew the appraisals were missing. But because the loans were boosting their quarterly earnings figures, management deliberately turned a blind eye. They chose profit over compliance. This wasn't a road agent, it was systemic negligence. Vance called me immediately. "We got them, OP. We have proof they ignored their own KYC and risk management protocols. This destroys their rogue agent defense. We didn't wait for trial. We scheduled the deposition of the regional manager who sent that email. Depositions are brutal. The regional manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, sat under the fluorescent lights, sweating. Vance grilled him for 4 hours. "Mr. Henderson," Vance asked, holding up the email, "did you verify the assets of the borrowers before overriding the compliance flag?" I relied on Harrison's assessment," he stammered. "So you admit you bypassed the bank's mandatory fraud prevention protocols to boost your quarterly numbers?" Vance pressed. "It was standard practice to expedite high-volume partners," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Standard practice?" Vance repeated for the court reporter. "So defrauding the shareholders and enabling money laundering is standard practice at Global Omni Bank?" His lawyer intervened. "Objection! Harassment!" "It's not harassment," Vance said. "It's the truth. And we are going to play this video for the jury." The deposition ended. We walked out knowing we had won. The bank knew it too. If that email and that video went public in a jury trial, the bank wouldn't just lose $30 million. They would face a regulatory investigation by the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, that could cost them their charter. 2 days later, Mr. Sterling called Vance. The arrogance was gone. "We want to settle," Sterling said. "We're listening," Vance replied. "We will release the lien on OP's property. We will issue a reconveyance deed, clearing the title. The house is his. We will also pay his legal fees." I looked at Vance. It was everything I wanted. I got the house, I got out of debt. But Vance covered the phone. "OP," Vance whispered. "We have them by the throat. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about the 30 other families Rick and the bank destroyed. If we settle now just for you, the evidence gets sealed. The bank buries this. Those other people get foreclosed on." I thought about the other victims I had met during the investigation. An elderly couple who lost their retirement home. A single mother who was evicted last week. "No," I told Vance. "I don't just want my house. I want a global settlement. I want them to make everyone whole, or we go to trial. Vance grinned. He uncovered the phone. Sterling, my client declines. Unless you are prepared to offer a global settlement for all 30 victims of the Harrison-Rick fraud ring, we are filing for class action certification tomorrow morning. We will turn this into a national lawsuit. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Class action status is the nuclear bomb of civil litigation. Give us 24 hours, Sterling said. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my half-renovated kitchen looking at the walls I had painted, wondering if I had just thrown it all away. I had gambled my sure victory for the sake of strangers. At 4 p.m. the next day, Vance called. They folded, Vance said. They're establishing a victim compensation fund of $15 million. Every mortgage linked to the Harrison fraud is being forgiven. Every victim gets their title clear, and they're paying damages for emotional distress. And the email? I asked. The proof of negligence? That's the only catch, Vance said. The settlement includes a non-disclosure agreement regarding the specific internal emails. They're paying $15 million to keep that regional manager out of jail. But the result is the same. You won. You beat the bank. I signed the papers the following week. I received the deed of reconveyance in the mail. It was a single sheet of paper, but it felt heavier than gold. It stated in bold letters, lien released, paid in full. I didn't pay a dime. The bank paid for its own greed. But there was one loose end left. Rick. Rick was still sitting in federal prison, awaiting sentencing. Because he had cooperated, he was expecting a light sentence, maybe 5 years. He thought he had gotten away with the worst of it. But I had one more card to play. During my investigation into his shell companies, I found something else. Something the FBI missed because they were focused on the bank fraud. I found payments to a contractor for waste disposal at a property Rick owned 3 years ago. A property that mysteriously burned down for insurance money. I wasn't done with Rick yet. I was about to turn his 5-year sentence into a life sentence.
The federal sentencing hearing is a strange ritual. It lacks the drama of a trial, but carries twice the weight. Rick stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, looking humble. It was an act. He had signed a plea agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. In exchange for testifying against the bank executive, Harrison, the government had agreed to recommend a sentence of just 60 months, 5 years, in a minimum security federal camp. With good behavior, he'd be out in 3. He still had hidden assets in crypto that the FBI hadn't found. He was planning his retirement, not his penance. I sat in the gallery, directly behind the prosecutor's table. I held a manila envelope in my hands. Inside was the evidence I had unearthed regarding the waste disposal payments. My investigation into Rick's shell companies had led me to a defunct LLC called Clean Slate Disposal. Rick had paid them $15,000 3 years ago. I ran a background check on the owner of Clean Slate. He wasn't a garbage man. He was a career criminal named Torch with 2 prior convictions for arson. I cross-referenced the date of the payment with Rick's insurance claim history. Exactly 2 days after the payment to Torch, a commercial warehouse owned by Rick had burned to the ground in the middle of the night. The cause was listed as undetermined electrical failure. Rick collected a $1.2 million insurance payout. This wasn't just insurance fraud. This was federal arson. Under federal law, using fire to commit a felony carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years, consecutive to any other sentence. And because the warehouse was located next to a residential apartment complex, it carried an endangerment of life enhancement. I waited until the judge asked the standard question, does the government have any further remarks before sentencing? I stood up. I wasn't a lawyer, but as a victim designated under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, I had the right to be heard. Your Honor, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet courtroom, I have evidence that the defendant has omitted material crimes from his plea disclosure. Evidence of arson. Rick whipped his head around. For the first time, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. The judge paused, approached the bench. I handed the envelope to the judge and the prosecutor.
The prosecutor scanned the bank records linking Rick to the known arsonist and the insurance claim report. His face hardened. The government hates being lied to. Rick had promised full disclosure in his plea deal. By hiding the arson, he had breached the agreement. The prosecutor turned to the judge. Your Honor, the government moves to withdraw the plea agreement immediately. We request a continuance to investigate these new allegations. If these documents are authentic, the defendant is looking at a significantly different guideline range. The judge looked at Rick. Mr. Rick, your plea deal is revoked. You are remanded to custody, pending a new indictment. Rick screamed. He literally screamed as the marshals dragged him out. He knew his life was over. The investigation into the arson took another 6 months. Torch, the arsonist, was arrested and quickly flipped on Rick to save himself. He confirmed Rick paid him to torch the warehouse for the insurance money. When Rick finally returned for sentencing a year later, there was no plea deal. There was no mercy. He was convicted of the original mortgage fraud charges, plus federal arson, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. He will be an old man when, if he ever gets out. With Rick and the banker gone, the dust finally settled. I received a check from the bank's victim compensation fund for $150,000. Damages for the stress and legal fees. I used that money to finish the house. I walked through my front door last night. The floors are polished, the kitchen is done. It's a beautiful Victorian home, restored to its original glory. But it's more than a house now. It's a fortress. I went to the county records office one last time. I looked up my address. There, in the permanent public record, was the reconveyance deed and my name, listed as the sole owner, free and clear of any liens. I learned a lot about the world during this fight. I learned that the system is designed to protect the big guys, but it has cracks. I learned that a fixer-upper isn't just about fixing walls. Sometimes you have to fix the neighborhood by taking out the trash. Rick thought he was a wolf among sheep. He forgot that sometimes a sheep is just a sheepdog with a very sharp bite.